Dear colleagues, as we reach the conclusion of this parliamentary conference, let us warmly welcome Senator Jerry Buttimer, Chair of the Upper House of the Irish Parliament and a former member of the Assembly. Mr. Chair, dear Michael, dear Roberto, dear colleagues, let me begin by expressing my deep appreciation for your participation and contributions. Our discussions have been very enriching. I want to thank each of you for spending this week in Ireland to champion the mission of the OSCE. Our organization, however, remains in a very complicated situation. We hope that the Ministerial Council meeting in December will deliver an agreement on the OSCE heads of institutions and help unlock decisions on the OSCE budget and future OSCE chairpersonships. In the meantime, our Parliamentary Assembly must remain active and engaged. Next week, I will lead a delegation to Serbia, where we will gain first-hand insight into the OSCE's work on the ground. Our focus will be on understanding how we, as parliamentarians, can strengthen the organization's efforts to assist our countries and to improve the lives of our citizens. In the coming weeks, you will also be observing elections in 4 different countries, a vital contribution to reinforcing democratic principles across the OSCE region. As we carry out this work, let us always remember that while we may have disagreements in our debates, we remain united in our commitment to the spirit of Helsinki and the principles it upholds. We all have a responsibility to rise above our disagreements to ensure that the OSCPA remains a forum of positive influence and constructive dialogue. It is fitting that we reflect on this here in Ireland, a country that has long championed peace and reconciliation in the face of adversity. I continue to believe that the OSCE can make a difference. Your engagement over the past days has proven that we can drive real change, even when the obstacles seem great. Before I close, let me express my gratitude to our hosts and to the International Secretariat for their hard work in organizing this meeting. Thank you to all the staff who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Let's give them a round of applause. I now give the floor to Senator Jerry Buttimer to deliver some closing remarks.
Uachtarán Gwenúisle an cédal síos is cúismór an bheith I bhur láthair nuamh an acáid an cnú 4 OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Madam President, dear colleagues, Deputy Michael Creed, Chair of the Irish Delegation, Secretary General Roberto, good to see you again, looking as fit as ever. And Madam President, can I thank you for being in Dublin and for spending your time here in debate on very important matters for us as parliamentarians. The event that has taken place has occurred because of the hard work of so many, and I'll come back to that, but I want at the beginning to thank the team in the Oireachtas for their wonderful stewardship, organisation in making sure that this successful venture has happened and that you've enjoyed your stay in Ireland. And I want on behalf of the Oireachtas to pay tribute to all of the team in the Oireachtas, Míle Buile Buchas. Madam President, you spoke about the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and it must be, and I will exhort to all of you as members, dear colleagues, to be proactive and be active and be proud of this organisation. Parliamentary assemblies require us to lead and to be active. And even though there is uncertainty about the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, we must make the case that this organisation is needed now more than ever. And I say that as somebody who has served with this body, with Senator Castles, for 4 great years, where we travelled the world in pursuit of human rights, but in the upholding of democracy through election observation. And it's incumbent on all of us that in the coming weeks and months ahead, wherever we have elections, that the voice and the presence of the OSCE is seen and heard at first hand. And I wish you well in your work. And I know that Senator Castles is travelling to the United States as part of the Irish delegation, and I wish him well. And may I, as the Cathaoirleach of the Seanad, pay tribute to Deputy Creed and to Senator Castles in particular, who are retiring at the next election. In Michael Creed, we have a person as a parliamentarian who is a minister and as a parliamentarian has served with distinction, always looking at the bigger picture, always looking at the global fight in the pursuit of what is the best for us. And I thank both of them sincerely, and I wish them well in their future careers. Go Míle maith agaibh. In being here today, it is important in these closing sessions that we reflect upon what you've heard in terms of the debate and the insightfulness of the remarks of many of the delegates. I want to thank the keynote speakers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, the delegates for your wonderful participation and insightful observations. I must also ensure, as Cathaoirleach, that we as parliamentarians don't just let the events of today and yesterday be forgotten. We must ensure that we learn and reflect upon the outcomes in the papers presented to us. That is the important point of this assembly, is to learn, reflect and move forward together. As your President has said, we may disagree, but we agree on the values. We agree on the trajectory going forward. This is a very special conference for us in the Oireachtas, because for the first time, we have hosted the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in this, the 22nd Autumn Conference. And I know from my past experience being at conferences that they can be difficult times, strongly held views, organisational mishaps here and there. But I know from talking to members of our Oireachtas team that this has been a very successful one. And I want to again thank the public engagement team and the interparliamentary team and the communications unit for the wonderful work that you've engaged upon to represent our country with distinction. And again, I won't name names, but this was a wonderful endeavour. It was a particular project of a very few members of the team in the Oireachtas, but you've carried this assembly as a badge of honour, and the flag of Ireland flies proudly because of the work that you've done, so thank you very much. Dear colleagues, as many of other previous speakers have said, the theme of this conference represented a significant opportunity to discuss the active role of parliamentarians in reinforcing the OSCE's comprehensive peace and security mandate. And dear colleagues, at a time when our world is at a very difficult era, an inflection point, a troubling time, our role as parliamentarians is needed more than ever. During the 3 working sessions of this conference, we've heard addresses from our former Prime Minister, our Minister for the Environment, Climate and Communications, and officials of various Irish agencies, along with a strong engagement from representatives of international organisations on a range of issues of direct relevance to your theme today. First of all, we heard on the OSCE's conflict cycle, including matters such as dialogue facilitation, conflict resolution, and post-conflict rehabilitation. We are, colleagues, reminded that the most important lesson is simply that a peace process can succeed. A peace process must be inclusive, and civil society has a huge role to play in building and sustaining the peace. We also heard many references to the roles that women have played and continue to play in achieving lasting peace. And that is very true on this island, where it was the Women's Coalition, through the shared story of loss, of grief, brought politicians to listen and to act. And this re-emphasises that we need increased participation in political life of women, and that's why in the future elections in many parts of the world, I do hope that we see more women elected. We talked of the importance of the OSCE's approach to security, one that comprehensively recognises the full spectrum of the root causes of conflict and instability, and of how to deal with these was duly highlighted. Earlier this morning, we witnessed important discussions on the role of MPs in fulfilling global commitments ahead of COP29, and in turn on addressing the overall climate crisis. As parliamentarians, we are deeply aware of the threat that climate crisis poses to global prosperity and development, and we must realise our active role in ensuring our climate commitments are met. and I want to commend our Spanish friends this morning for their remarks in speaking about that the fight against climate change must be at the heart of all of our policies. Finally, dear colleagues, our third session discussed the ever so important issue of how to enhance migration governance in the OSCE region in order to foster long-term sustainable development. And Mr. Taha is so right in what he said that walls won't stop people coming, and that we must ensure that we promote regular pathways, and that is what we must promote as parliamentarians. And during all of these sessions, we reflected on the active role that we, as members of national parliaments with democratic legitimacy, play in building trust, in raising awareness and supporting parliamentarians to show courage, to stand up to leaders who inflict such tragedy on their neighbours and in turn on their own citizens. Let us remind ourselves that the role we play in advancing and reinforcing the fundamental objectives of this organisation is the key to success. Accordingly, despite all the challenges, crisis and uncertainty the world is currently going through, this conference has demonstrated the active role of parliamentary democracy and diplomacy can achieve in working towards building bridges and promoting cooperation and general dialogue. By working together, OSCE parliamentarians can play a more effective role and can address the common challenges affecting our people or regions, making a real difference towards the realisation of peace and security. In conclusion, can I again reiterate my thanks to all of you for being here, for the wonderful opportunity to be here this evening, and to wish you, Madam President, every success in your role and in this organisation's future role. To thank Roberto and his team for the wonderful work that they do. This is the end of one chapter, the beginning of the next chapter for this organisation. Enjoy tonight's final dinner, and again, as we say in Irish, Ní nart go cur le chéile, there is unity and strength. Gur míle maith go léir.
Thank you, Senator. I now give the floor to the head of Irish OSCE's head of delegation, Michael Creed.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Buttimer, for your kind remarks. I think we've had a very successful gathering here in Dublin, and just a minor correction to my colleague, Senator Buttimer. We did meet here in Dublin 15 years ago, the OSCE EPA, to discuss then what was the darkening clouds of the global financial crisis. And having been in the vanguard, along with yourself, Senator Buttimer, of the efforts to solve that problem here, and I think it's fair to say we did it reasonably well, given the budget which we passed in our Parliament earlier this week. And indeed, globally, I think we probably overcame that budgetary crisis as well, and the OSCE EPA played its role in that regard. I do hope that it's not another 15 years before we come back to Dublin. We have learned in hosting this event, and I think we have done it very well, and I'd like to acknowledge the team that were involved from the Irish side in organising the event and to pay tribute to them. We gather here under the title Helsinki, 50 years and how to address the security and peace into the future. Probably more challenging and existential in nature challenges than we faced 15 years ago in terms of the global financial crisis. Financial crises come and go. I'm sure they will come again. But this is a challenge that will be with us. Peace and security, the closely associated issues of climate and migration, these are going to be long-term issues. There's no easy fix. There's no popular fix. It is a real challenge. Maybe, you know, the title was The Role of Parliaments. And sometimes in Parliament we can get lost in the herd. I think maybe we should have titled it, with hindsight, The Role of Parliamentarians. Because each and every one of us individually has a role to play. Not a role to be necessarily popular, but to be practical, to be problem solving. And I think that's a real challenge for parliamentarians globally, and I have great faith in, having listened to the contributions here today and over the last couple of days, that this institution, the OSCE EPA, has a significant role to play. As individual parliamentarians, domestically, in our own parliaments, in our own communities, in international organisations like this, like the United Nations, like the European Union, bilaterally, multilaterally. The problems of the world will only be solved by international cooperation, not by being personally popular, not by being the loudest voice in the room, but by being the most practical problem-solving parliamentarian. As Jerry alluded to, I'm not seeking re-election. I'm almost 40 years in politics. But I've often taken comfort from the American poet, Marianne Williamson. And I quote from her, and she said, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are, our deepest fear is that we are, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us." And when I see a collection of my parliamentary colleagues across the member states of the OSCE EPA, I see enormous potential. I see great light. And I am hopeful, as a consequence for the future, that collectively, in our domestic parliaments and international bodies like the OSCE EPA, multilaterally, bilaterally, that we can solve the problems, the manifestation of which we've discussed here today: climate, migration, the horrible, horrible situation in Ukraine because of Russia's illegal war and all the problems that that has given rise to for us in the OSCE EPA, the terrible situation in Sudan, in the Middle East. We are powerful beyond measure, individually and collectively. It is our light that will solve these problems. And I am confident, because of that, that, existential though these challenges might be, that the only way to solve them is collectively, is at international fora like this, because these problems are bigger than any one of our nations individually. I'm also confident, because of the leadership that we have in the OSCE EPA, through you, Madam President, through Roberto and his team, but particularly because of all of you individually, that collectively we can meet these challenges ahead. And I wish you every success into the future. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Michael. Listening to you makes me think that, do you think that you could reconsider your leaving politics?
40 years is enough.
It was a very touching and emotional speech, at least for me, and I think everybody here in this hall can share that view. Finally, we have come to the stage where I have to give the floor to Secretary General Montella for his final words.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear Pia. Mine will not be as inspiring, and I will not even attempt to, but Jerry, Michael, thank you very much for hosting us here after the economic conference that you hosted in 2009. I wasn't part of that. I just joined a month later. But this has been a great, successful session. There is one more tomorrow on a very topic and central issue, the situation in the Middle East, and we will have our Mediterranean Forum tomorrow. I'd like to thank you, Pia, also for your leadership and for deciding after so many difficult debates, let's say also internally with us at the Secretariat, on whether the issues of the Middle East should be featuring high in our agenda. We have come to the conclusions that it's very difficult to have 300 parliamentarians in one room and discuss about many other important topics of our region while neglecting what is happening in the Middle East. So I thank you for making that decision. Some members have already discussed these topics here, but the best, let's say, and the most important moment will be tomorrow morning, where in the Mediterranean Forum we can go really in the center of the question. Michael, you said something very important. This is an international organization which tries through the multilateral system to solve problems that we have. All the challenges that we have, be it movement of people, be it the fight against terrorism, be it these conflicts that we are dealing with in our region, cannot be solved by one, two big powers. They need to have also a collaborative multilateral system that we try to forge here. This is an assembly of elected politicians who meet 3 times a year, but I've seen an incredible enthusiasm in these members in this last period. We have a record high participation of members in all the activities that we do. This shows that this assembly is very healthy. It's healthy politically because our members participate, is healthy financially. Our members are paying their dues, apart from one country, Russian Federation, but everybody else is paying their dues, and now 15 countries have come forth with extra budget contributions. So I will not make a long speech here. I just want to say thank you to Ireland, thank you to you, Madam President, for taking this very important political role in our assembly, also in guiding our assembly in debating issues central to our geopolitical realities. I want to thank also the team of the Secretariat headed by Gustavo and all the other ones who have worked on the podium but behind the scenes also to make sure that this event together with the colleagues of the Irish Parliament could take place. And to conclude, because I want to also give a little sign of appreciation for the countries that have contributed. There is one country that lately take a very important extra budget contribution to our budget. That is Luxembourg. So I'd like to invite the head of the delegation from Luxembourg to the podium. I have a little present for you. But thank you very much for the meeting. It's no surprise to men what is the little present.
Let's see. Thank you, Roberto. I'm very honored.
Thank you so much.
That's perfect.
And but this one is very important. It's his favorite number.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's number 7 for Cristiano Ronaldo. So you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And like Roberto commented, tomorrow morning we will gather here again for our Mediterranean Forum. But until then, I declare this meeting adjourned.